They believed Earth was unprepared, that its people, fractured and primitive, would fold beneath the weight of a superior force. But history will mark this day as the turning point, not of conquest, but of revelation. Commander Kyle Tharan stood on the bridge of the Stellar Dominance, gazing at the blue-green planet through the massive observation window. He exhaled through clenched jaws in amusement as the scan results scrolled across his neural interface. Primitive nuclear fission, combustion-based vehicles. Initial surveys indicate they haven't even established a permanent presence beyond their moon. He let out a throaty laugh that echoed across the command deck. Supreme Commander, First Officer Alira Voss approached, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with excitement. The preliminary analysis shows their most advanced weapons rely on chemical propulsion and crude atomic devices. Their orbital capabilities are limited to basic satellites and a single modular station. Tharan's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of calculated certainty among his species. Another Class 3 civilization ripe for integration into the Galactic Consortium. Prepare the standard conquest protocols. Behind him, Strategic Analyst. Strategic Analyst Selin Rowe cleared her throat, a habit she'd picked up from studying thousands of species. Commander, if I may, there are some anomalies in the data. Anomalies? Theron waved one of his upper limbs dismissively. What could possibly be anomalous about such a backward species? Well, sir, Rowe's tentacles twisted nervously. Their entertainment broadcasts suggest an unusual fixation with extraterrestrial invasions. They've produced thousands of simulated scenarios depicting conflict with alien civilizations. Paranoid primitives, Theron responded with measured disdain. Common among isolated species, they fear what they don't understand. The massive warship hung in high orbit, its quantum stealth fields rendering it invisible to Earth's detection systems. Around them, a fleet of 50 support vessels maintained perfect formation, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. Begin the standard intimidation sequence, Theron commanded. Power up the atmospheric generators. Let's give them a proper show of force. These humans will learn their place in the galaxy, just like all the others. Lieutenant Commander Voss hesitated. Sir, there's something else. Their military spending. It's astronomical for their technology level. Nearly every nation maintains standing armies, and their weapons development programs never ceased, even in peacetime. A species that loves warfare. Perfect. They'll make excellent shock troops once we've properly subjugated them. Theron stretched his armored carapace, the morning molt making him irritable. Their primitive weapons will be useless against our quantum shields. Prepare the first wave of dropships. The bridge crew scrambled to comply, but Rowe remained troubled. She pulled up more data streams, her eyes widening at what she found. Commander, I strongly recommend we conduct more thorough scans. These humans, they're different. Their adaptation rate exceeds anything in our database. They went from primitive flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 solar cycles. Enough. Theron slammed his command staff against the deck. I didn't conquer 15 civilizations by being cautious. The Galactic Consortium expects results, and I will deliver this backwater planet to them gift-wrapped and ready for exploitation. The bridge fell silent, but the quiet was heavy with unspoken concerns. Outside, Earth rotated serenely, its oceans glittering in the sunlight, its cities twinkling like stars on the night side. None of the crew noticed the small objects moving in the extreme distance or the sudden increase in encrypted communications from the surface. Launch the atmospheric display, Theron commanded. Let's show these primitives what real power looks like. By this time tomorrow, they'll be begging to serve the consortium. As the first energy pulses prepared to light up Earth's sky, Ro made one final attempt. "Sir, there's an old human saying I found in their archives, something about not poking sleeping bears." "Bears?" Theron stated with grim confidence. "What could primitive Earth wildlife possibly teach us about conquest?" The energy pulses fired, and the sky above Earth began to glow with the signature colors of the consortium fleet. Commander Theron stood proudly, absolutely certain this would be his easiest conquest yet. He had no way of knowing he'd just made the biggest mistake of his soon-to-be, very short career. The quantum shields pulsed with rainbow colors across Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky from Beijing to New York. Commander Theron watched with satisfaction as his ship's energy display created artificial auroras, visible even in daylight. Send the standard submission demands through their primitive broadcast systems. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Voss' voice cracked with alarm, "we're detecting massive power spikes from the surface." "Impossible." Theron leaned forward in his command chair. "Their technology is too primitive to detect our—" The rest of his sentence vanished in a burst of static as every screen on the bridge flickered. A calm, human voice filled the command center, speaking perfect Galactic standard. "Attention unauthorized vessels in Earth orbit. You have entered restricted space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will respond with appropriate force." Theron's mandibles dropped open. They speak our language. How? "Sir," Strategic Analyst Ro's tentacles were practically tied in knots. "The transmission originated from multiple points simultaneously. They've been studying our communications." "Preposterous!" Theron slammed his fist on the command console. "Launch a probing attack. Target their largest military installation. Show them the consequences of defiance." 3 dropships detached from the stellar dominance, their hulls gleaming as they entered the atmosphere. On the tactical display, they approached a sprawling complex in a place called Nevada. "Dropships report optimal attack trajectory," Voss announced. "Time to target, 30 seconds. Wait, what are those readings?" The Nevada desert seemed to ripple, and suddenly the air was filled with projectiles moving at impossible speeds. 2 dropships vanished in balls of plasma before their crews could even scream. The third spun out of control, its quantum shields failing under the assault of weapons that, according to every scan, couldn't possibly exist. "Full retreat," Theron shouted. "Get that ship back to—" The surviving dropship exploded, and this time the humans made sure to broadcast the crew's final transmissions to the entire fleet. Theron listened in horror as his elite troops babbled about swarms of autonomous drones and energy weapons hidden in the mountains. Sir Ro's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm detecting similar installations activating worldwide. The humans, they're not running. They're not panicking. They're coordinating." On the tactical display, dots of light began appearing across the planet's surface. Missile silos opened, revealing weapons far more advanced than anything in their scans. Hidden bases emerged from beneath oceans and mountains, and in high orbit, previously invisible satellites began powering up weapon systems that made the stellar dominance's arsenal look primitive in comparison. "Millions of credits in intelligence gathering," Theron muttered. "Thousands of scans. How did we miss this?" "Because they wanted us to miss it." Ro pulled up file after file of human military history. "Sir, look at this. Their entire entertainment industry. It wasn't just fiction, it was preparation. They've been gaming out scenarios like this for centuries." Another transmission cut through their command channels. This time, It was a different human voice speaking with what Rose's cultural database identified as a British accent. "I do hope we didn't break your lovely dropships. We've only had a few decades to reverse engineer the technology from your previous scout ships. You really should be more careful about where you crash those things." Theron's scales turned pale. "Previous scout ships? What is he talking about?" "Oh dear." The human's voice dripped with false concern. "Did your superiors not tell you? Earth has been classified as a protected observation zone for the past 70 years. Those weren't crashes at all. We just let you think they were. Had to give you something to find, after all. Couldn't have you spotting the real tech now, could we?" Across the bridge, warning signals began blaring. Sensors detected hundreds of small craft emerging from hidden lunar bases. Orbital platforms that had appeared to be simple communication satellites transformed into weapon platforms. And from the ocean depths, massive vessels began surfacing, each one bristling with technology that matched or exceeded the consortium's capabilities. Sir Voss shouted, "They're powering up something in their asteroid belt. Energy readings are off the scale." The human transmission continued, now sounding almost bored. "Right then, we've got a betting pool going on whether you'll choose immediate surrender or try something heroically stupid. I've got 50 quid on stupid, so please don't disappoint me." Theron stared at the tactical display, watching as humanity's true military might revealed itself. All around his fleet, weapons platforms were powering up, creating an interlocking network of firing solutions that offered no escape. The humans hadn't just prepared for invasion. They'd been waiting for it, hoping for it, ready to spring a trap centuries in the making. Commander Rose's voice shook. "What are your orders?" Before Theron could respond, a new signal appeared. This one came from the lunar surface, accompanied by a video feed. The image showed a massive hangar filled with ships that looked suspiciously like improved versions of consortium designs. Behind them stood row after row of powered armor suits, each one emblazoned with the logo of the United Earth Defense Force. "I don't suppose," Theron said weakly, "that this would be a good time to discuss peaceful diplomatic relations." But the British voice returned, remarking with cold precision, "Oh, my dear Commander, we're way past diplomacy. Now shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Or would you prefer a practical demonstration of why humanity hasn't had a proper war in decades? We've been ever so eager to test our new toys." Commander Theron had exactly 3 seconds to regret his life choices before the humans launched their first wave of attacks. The Stellar Dominance's sensors registered thousands of incoming projectiles, each one barely larger than a personal transport pod. "Pathetic," he sneered, trying to maintain his composure. "Their missiles are so small, they couldn't possibly—" "By the void, what is that?" The tiny projectile split open mid-flight, releasing swarms of even smaller drones. Each drone carried what appeared to be a scaled-down version of the consortium's own quantum destabilization technology. Some clever human scientist had apparently decided that if big bombs were good, thousands of tiny ones would be better. "Evasive maneuvers," Theron shouted. But the drones were everywhere, transforming his elegant battle formation into a chaos of panicked ships trying to swat armies of mechanical insects. Sir Rose's tentacles were practically dancing with nervous energy. "I'm detecting unusual readings from Earth's oceans. Oh, no." The surface of the Pacific Ocean bulged upward as something massive broke through. A vessel larger than anything humanity should have been able to build rose from the depths, water cascading off quantum-hardened hull plates that looked suspiciously like upgraded versions of consortium designs. The humans named it Leviathan. Ro reported, her voice filled with a mix of terror and admiration. Sir, it's not alone. Similar vessels emerged from every major ocean. Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, even the Mediterranean spawned a behemoth of human engineering. Each one bristled with weapon systems that, according to every intelligence report, shouldn't exist for at least another 3 centuries. Impossible. Theron watched as his support ships tried to engage the ocean-born monsters. How did they advance so quickly? Their technology was primitive just decades ago. The British voice returned, now sounding positively commanding. You can thank those scout ships you so carelessly lost. Did you really think we wouldn't take them apart? Wouldn't learn from them? Wouldn't improve upon them? Honestly, it's like you people have never watched a single one of our science fiction shows. A new signal cut in. This one tagged as coming from the Leviathan itself. This is Admiral Cassandra Riven of the United Earth Defense Force. Your ships are now surrounded by our hunter-killer drone swarms. The Leviathan battle group has you in a targeted quantum lock. And just to make sure you're paying attention, the moon flickered, actually flickered, like a hologram experiencing technical difficulties. No, Theron breathed. No, that's not possible. The lunar surface rippled, and sections of it simply vanished, revealing massive hangar bays and weapon ports that had been hidden beneath a planetary-scale holographic disguise. Humanity hadn't just militarized their planet, they'd turned their moon into a fortress. 60 years. Ro was practically hyperventilating as she read through decoded human transmissions. They've been preparing for this for 60 years. Every alien movie, every invasion story, every piece of science fiction. They were writing training manuals, running simulations. Their entire entertainment industry was one giant military think tank. The stellar dominance shuddered as another wave of attack struck their shields. This time, the weapons were phased plasma torpedoes, a technology that the consortium's best scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. The humans had apparently missed that memo. Status report, Theron demanded. Lieutenant Commander Voss's voice cracked. We've lost 30% of the fleet to drone strikes. The ocean-based vessels are picking off our support ships one by one. And the moon. Sir, the moon is launching something. Massive doors opened in the lunar surface, revealing row after row of sleek, predatory ships. Each one bore the same insignia, a stylized Earth, surrounded by defensive arrays with the letters UEDF emblazoned below. As Theron watched in horror, hundreds of these ships emerged, their crews probably staring through reinforced visors behind their quantum-reinforced view screens. Commander Admiral Blackwood's voice was almost gentle. I really must thank you. We've been waiting decades to test these systems against actual consortium ships. Your fleet's performance data will be invaluable for our research and development teams. Research and... he exhaled through clenched jaws in shock. You're using us as a weapons test. Well, obviously, the British voice chimed in again. Did you think we'd waste our best technology on a simple invasion force? These are just our mid-range defensive systems. Would you like to see what we've got hiding in the asteroid belt? The betting pool is giving excellent odds on you surviving long enough to witness our really interesting toys. As if to punctuate this point, a group of human ships demonstrated their version of quantum tunneling technology, phasing through the consortium's supposedly impenetrable shields as if they were no more substantial than fog. They emerged inside the defense perimeter, weapons already charging. Sir Voss shouted, "They're broadcasting technical specifications of our own ships back to us, with suggested improvements. They're critiquing our design choices." Indeed, every human transmission now included detailed annotations about the consortium fleet's structural weaknesses, along with engineering notes on how to correct them. The humans weren't just defeating them, they were grading their performance. Commander Theron, Admiral Blackwood's voice carried a hint of amusement. Perhaps you'd like to surrender now before we demonstrate our improvements to your antimatter containment systems. Theron slumped in his command chair, watching as his mighty invasion fleet was systematically dismantled by technology that his people had deemed impossible. Wielded by a species that was supposed to be primitive, coordinated by commanders who had apparently been planning this moment since before they had reliable spaceflight. One last thing, the British voice added with clinical clarity. Those entertainment broadcasts you monitored, the ones showing us being defeated by alien invaders, those were our training simulations for what not to do. Quite helpful, really. Showed us exactly how not to build our defenses. You might want to mention that in your report to the consortium, assuming, of course, that we let any of you leave to make a report. Around the stellar dominance, space itself owed to warp as humanity's true defensive capabilities revealed themselves. Hidden weapon platforms emerged from quantum bubbles, stealth fields dropped to reveal entire battle fleets, and through it all, the humans kept providing helpful commentary on the consortium's tactical mistakes. Theron had only one question left. How? He asked weakly. How did you advance so quickly? Admiral Blackwood's response was accompanied by what humans called a chuckle. Commander, has anyone ever told you about something we call the military-industrial entertainment complex? No. Well, you're about to get a practical demonstration. As the Stellar Dominance's crew watched their fleet being systematically dismantled, strategic analyst Rowe delved deeper into Earth's historical archives. Her growing horror reflected on her bioluminescent patches, which had faded to a sickly pale blue. Commander, she whispered, not these humans. They've been fighting wars since before they discovered metalworking. They turned everything into weapons. Everything. They looked at birds and said, what if we made metal ones that dropped explosives? They saw fish and thought, let's make underwater ships that launch nuclear missiles. Theron watched another support ship dissolve under a barrage of weapons that shouldn't exist. Surely they had periods of peace. That's even worse. Rowe pulled up more data streams. During peacetime, they created something called war games. Their military leaders would split into teams and pretend to fight each other just to stay sharp, and their entertainment. By the void, their entertainment. What about it? Lieutenant Commander Voss asked, trying to maintain shield stability as another wave of impossibly small drones attempted to quantum tunnel through their defenses. They turned warfare into entertainment. Movies, video games, books, billions of them, each one a different scenario for alien invasion or global conflict. And the solutions they created for fictional problems, they built them, actually built them. A new transmission cut through their discussion. Speaking of entertainment, Admiral Blackwood's voice carried a note of pride. You should see what our gaming division came up with. That shield frequency randomizer that's giving you so much trouble. That was designed by a teenager playing Alien Invasion Defense Simulator 2023. We hired her straight out of high school. Theron's scales itched as he processed this information. You're saying children designed these weapons? Oh, not all of them. The British coordinator chimed in. The quantum phase torpedoes were actually developed by a group of online friends, arguing about science fiction physics in something called a Reddit thread. Fascinating discussion, really. Ended up revolutionizing our understanding of particle physics. Rowe's tentacles wrapped around her console as she uncovered more terrifying information. Sir, their adaptability rates are off the charts. They went from their first powered flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 years. They developed atomic power, and their first thought was, how many different ways can we make this explode? The humans have a saying, Admiral Blackwood added helpfully. Necessity is the mother of invention. Although in our case, paranoia was probably the father, anxiety was the weird uncle, and Hollywood handled the babysitting. Another support ship vanished, this one taken out by what appeared to be a swarm of self-replicating nanobots. The humans had apparently looked at the concept of gray goo and thought, what if we could control it? So Voss reported, her voice shaking. I'm intercepting transmissions from Earth's surface. Every nation, every military force, they're all working together, sharing technologies, coordinating attacks. How is this possible? Our intelligence suggested they couldn't agree on anything. Oh, that. The British voice sounded amused. Nothing unites humans quite like an external threat. Really, you should thank yourselves. We haven't had this much global cooperation since that time someone threatened to deflect an asteroid toward Earth. Spoiler alert. We now have 15 different systems for destroying planet-killing rocks. Tested them all on Jupiter's moons. Quite the light show. Ro's console suddenly lit up with new data. Commander, I'm reading thousands of launches from Earth's surface. They're civilians, private space companies, independent research groups, something called weekend warrior clubs. Indeed, the space around Earth was filling with vessels of all shapes and sizes. Some were clearly military, others appeared to be hastily converted civilian craft. All of them were armed with weapons that matched or exceeded consortium technology. Ah, yes, Admiral Blackwood said proudly. Meet our privateer fleet. Turns out when you tell space enthusiasts that aliens might invade, they get really creative with their ship designs. That group using modified mining lasers, they're technically a social club from Australia, very enthusiastic about their hobby. Theron watched in stunned silence as a luxury space yacht, apparently converted for combat in someone's garage, disabled a consortium heavy cruiser using technology that looked suspiciously like repurposed satellite dishes and modified game console processors. The truly terrifying part, Ro continued, her voice barely a whisper, is that this isn't even their final form. They're adapting to our technology in real time. Each weapon they fire teaches them more about our capabilities. They're treating this invasion as a learning experience. Well, of course we are, the British coordinator replied with clinical clarity. Best way to test new systems is against live targets. Your fleet is providing invaluable data for our weapons development programs. The research papers from this encounter will keep our scientists busy for months. A final set of data scrolled across Ro's screen, and her bioluminescence went completely dark. Sir, according to these records, humans invented most of their greatest technologies because someone said it was impossible. They developed powered flight because everyone said it couldn't be done. They reached their moon because someone said they couldn't. They literally run on spite. And coffee, Admiral Blackwood added. Don't forget the coffee. Speaking of which, my team's taking bets on how long your quantum shields will hold against our latest generation of phase disruptors. Care to offer an estimate? It'll help settle the office pool. Commander Theron stared at the tactical display, watching the last remnants of his once proud fleet disintegrating under human attacks. The Stellar Dominance's shields flickered as yet another wave of impossible weapons battered them. Plot an escape vector, he commanded. We must warn the consortium. About that, the British coordinator's voice cut in. We're running a fascinating experiment on quantum space-time manipulation. Would you like to see what happens when we create a localized time dilation field? Your engines might find it interesting. Before Theron could respond, space itself seemed to twist around his flagship. The stars blurred as temporal mechanics that shouldn't be possible outside of theoretical physics papers suddenly became very, very real. So Voss shouted, "Our engines are operating at normal power, but we're only moving at 10% of standard speed. They've turned space itself against us." "Not just space," Admiral Blackwood added with clinical clarity. "We're also experimenting with probability manipulation. You might notice your weapons have become surprisingly unreliable. Amazing what you can accomplish when you let quantum physicists collaborate with video game developers." Theron slammed his fist on the command console. "This is impossible. No species could advance this quickly," Quick-Row stated with grim confidence with a rising edge of fear. "Sir, I just found their classified military archives. They've been preparing for this since they first looked up at the stars. Every scientific breakthrough, every technological advancement, they always ask themselves, how can we use this to defend Earth?" The stellar dominance shuddered as another human weapon found its mark. This one seemed to be powered by something that, according to all known physics, should have created a black hole. The humans had apparently figured out how to harness vacuum energy as a power source. "All hands, battle stations," Valakor ordered. "Prepare for—" "Oh, do stop that," the British voice interrupted. "You're only embarrassing yourself now. By the way, those escape pods you're preparing to launch, we've already calculated their trajectories and have detention fields waiting. Quite standard procedure, really. We got the idea from one of our more popular science fiction shows." Rowe's console erupted with new warnings. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy readings from the asteroid belt. They're moving the asteroids." Indeed, the humans had apparently decided that simply shooting at the consortium fleet wasn't interesting enough. Massive engines attached to strategic asteroids fired up, creating an intricate ballet of celestial bodies that effectively boxed in the remaining alien ships. Sir Voss reported, her voice trembling. "The humans are offering surrender terms. They want us to participate in something called a technical exchange program. They're particularly interested in our cafeteria food synthesizers." "Our food synthesizers?" Valakor blinked all four eyes in confusion. "In the middle of a battle?" "Well, yes," Admiral Blackwood replied. "We've mostly solved the whole war thing, but decent coffee in space is still a challenge. Priorities, you understand." The stellar dominance's engines shouted as they tried to break free from the time dilation field. Around them, the remaining consortium ships were being systematically captured or disabled by increasingly creative human weapons. One vessel was currently being towed away by what appeared to be a modified space tug operated by a civilian mining corporation. Commander Rowe said, her voice hollow. "You need to see this. I've compiled a summary of human military history. They